computer so I don't go through the traumas of last week or the week before. Okay, Mary, I muted you, and Mike, I've muted you as well. I am going to, or my intention this week is to just maybe have a couple of places where I can just take a pause and answer any questions that might occur in the previous segment that I've spoken about. So do feel free to unmute yourself at any point to ask a question. Or indeed, again, feel free to use the chat function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. It's like a little speech bubble where you could potentially post a question that I might be able to pick up. So I'm going to share my screen now. So hopefully everyone can see my screen, which is a white, it's just white with a grey swoosh through it. Can you give me a nod if you can see that? Yeah, okay, perfect. So as always, I'm kind of conscious that I've got a whole wide range of experienced golfers of lots of different abilities. So the information I'm going to give today, and today's topic is on what I would call quality practice. And quality practice for me is not only the fast track to improved skills and lower scores, but it's also great fun. And I think we should really draw into the fact that it should be great fun as well. So I'm going to generalize to a degree. I'm going to contextualize where I can and kind of offer different examples. And I am going to talk and polarize conversations today around novice golfers and expert golfers, for the want of better phrases, and how quality practice might differ for them, but the principles are the same. And I guess a goal of this session is to kind of help you start to manage yourselves from that novice from that novice end of the spectrum through to the kind of master expert end of the spectrum, where you can. So just to make sure we understand where quality practice fits into what we've spoken about before, just a quick recap. We've spoken about the 18-hole plan and whether we're looking at breaking 90 or breaking 80 or breaking 100 or breaking par. We've spoken about how that links into personal par and how we can break that 18-hole plan into identifying par for each hole and how we might tailor that for different conditions. We've spoken about strategy and we've spoken about using shot patterns. So this is the 6th hole at Mill Green.
Mark, I've lost your sound.
Sorry, Graham. Say that again, Graham. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, cool. So we've spoken about shot patterns and shot strategies and how we use a shot pattern. So the red line is the center of the shot pattern, and the yellow line is where this person might align in order to get there to center their shot pattern. And we've also spoken about being flexible with our strategies. So depending on which one of those shots we hit, we've got different options and different choices in order to still achieve our personal par. We've also spoken about separation value and how we can prioritize skills in identifying, like, based on my vision for 2020 and the time that I have and what are the key areas that I need to improve. So we've spoken about how we can prioritize that using separation values. And then we spoke about how, I shared these ceilings, if you like, as to for each breaking score, what some, you could argue arbitrary, but some of them are very important. Statistics and skills we might look at in order to benchmark the standard that we're playing to, or we want to play to. So to help with shaping this particular session, I want to give you a student, or I want you to imagine a student who is breaking 80, wants to break 80, sorry. So he's averaging, or she's averaging mid-80s. And we've looked at their performances, and we can see actually they hit the golf ball 240 yards, and they're consistently hitting fairways above 56%. So we know as far as separation values are concerned, tee shots are driving distance is in position. Greens in regulation, they're consistently hitting 8 greens or more in regulation. So we know that as a separation value, again, approach play is in a pretty strong position. But one area that isn't particularly strong for them is putting. And in this example, and the example we're going to use today, is that we've got a golfer who is consistently scoring 35 putts per round. And ideally, we know we want them to be around that 31 putts per round, looking at 5 1 putts and less than 2 3 putts a round. So what we've done is decided that we're going to focus in on that area there. So what does quality practice look like, and what does quality practice mean? How do we get from being a 35 plus a round scorer on the greens to a 31 or less scorer on the greens? And we've defined, and this came from national level, this came with working with the girls in the national site, what quality practice means to us. And it's a phrase that I've stuck with for the last couple of years, and it's been really impactful. So the definition of quality practice is to have a positive impact on a meaningful skill that is process focused, cognitively engaging, and progressively challenging. So just to help break that out, process focused is about what you can control. It's about the behaviors you demonstrate, and it's about your action plan. Cognitively engaging means you're having to think about it. It's about what you're doing, thinking about what you're doing. It's about predicting outcomes. And it's about comparing what your predicted outcomes are versus your actual outcomes. And progressively challenging is about making it harder, making it look a little bit more like golf, and ultimately eventually taking that practice to the golf course. And this is one of the big things for me, and I have this discussion often with other coaches as well, is that practice is perceived to be something you do off the golf course. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have a little mind shift and say, well, actually, there's no reason why I can't take my practice onto the golf course, or I could take my practice onto the golf course even when I'm playing in a match, or even when I'm playing in my swindle, because today's practice is just in preparation for the bigger event tomorrow. And if we get good at this, and if we understand this, it becomes very manageable for us. So I'm going to take you back to the start of that statement now. And again, I think this is critical, to have a positive impact on a meaningful skill. So I think it's important for me to differentiate between what a skill is and what technique is. Because I think, again, a lot of us can go to the driving range with the ambition to improve our technique, which is reflected by this picture on the right-hand side. This is taken from a friend of mine, some of his work, Adam Young. It's brilliant if you ever want to go and check it out. But this picture on the right depicts somebody who's working on technique. And I think a lot of golf coaching drives towards working on technique and improving technique. And there's an assumption made that if I improve my technique, I'm going to lower my scores, I'm going to improve my skill. And I'm not sure that's always true. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a healthy belief to be working by. This picture on the left, for me, denotes skill, where I've got all of those golf balls around that hole in that pin position. Now, depending on where we started with these golf balls, I could have applied lots of different techniques in order for those golf balls to end up there. And I think that's an important distinction to make. So has anyone got any questions? This is one of those times when I want to kind of jump back out of here. And has anyone got any questions related to that? Just unmute yourselves. Feel free to. So any questions related to the difference between technique and developing skill, and how quality practice is going to help fast track those skills so we can shoot our personal par more often, consistently scoring lower. No? Okay, cool. We'll move on then. So it's really important for me to differentiate between skill and technique. So linking into practice, one of the things and the important things for us to understand is we want to upskill. So we need to practice. And one of the things that's really helpful for us to work with is understanding that in how difficult should practice be. And there's two forms or two definitions of difficulty. First of all, there's nominal, and that really links to how far away I am from the hole. So if I'm 4 foot away, it's going to be easier than if I'm 8 foot away. And this picture just kind of highlights what the successful percentage makes are from PGA Tour players. And there's a pretty robust studies done. There's lots of shot data collected. And the thing about nominal difficulty, and it makes sense, is there's a predictable value that says the further away from the hole I am, the harder it is. So that's a really simple way of understanding nominal difficulty. However, functional difficulty is different and relative to the skill of the golfer and the environment that they're performing that skill in and the demands of that task at that time. So, for example, a 6 foot putt for an expert performer would be easier than a 6 foot putt for a novice performer. A 6 foot putt that's straight uphill would be less difficult, than a 6 foot putt that's on a downhill left to right break. Yet the nominal difficulty is the same. So they're both 6 foot putts, but functionally they're completely different. And this is a really important thing to understand so that you can help manage yourself and you can progressively challenge your own practice, and you can also progressively manage yourself from novice to that expert master scenario. So the other thing is the idea that, sorry, just going to switch that off, is the context. So if I've got a 6 foot putt uphill, I've got a 6 foot putt downhill left to right, but I also may be faced with one of those putts in order to win the club championship, or in order to win a medal, or in order to win, beat my friends for a cup of tea on a Tuesday afternoon. And it means something different. So therefore it becomes more difficult, or perceptually it becomes more difficult. So nominal difficulty and functional difficulty, very different, but very important to understand. Here is me. So how do we use difficulty to learn? And it's important when we talk about practice to understand, are we practicing to perform, or are we practicing to learn? So if we take you back to our student that we talked about at the start, our student wants to get from 35 plus putts around to 31 minus putts around, less than 31 putts around. And therefore, they need to learn some new stuff. They need to learn some new skills in order to make that transition. And we need to use difficulty in order to help them make that transition. And I share this picture of me here. And this is me practicing just at the start of this year when I thought I was going to get some golf in and competitive golf, which I was quite looking forward to. But that's put a kibosh on it now. But I was working on the skill of managing my club face and my strike so that I would consistently hit the ball better with a more predictable flight, which would contribute towards my approach play being stronger. So I was working on the skill of managing face. So I needed to understand what difficulty level did I need to pitch that at in order to help me develop that skill. And information must be present for learning to occur. Now, this is really important. And there's two elements that go into information. And that is action plan, which, and it is critical. I've hopefully some of you that had lessons with me, or those of you that have lessons with me, I will consistently ask questions about what's your intention, what are you planning on doing. This is you formulating an action plan, and I'm wondering whether or not this is a better way of presenting this as an idea, because I get a lot of feedback. So, well, what do you mean? I just want to hit it straight. I just want to hit it long. That's my intention. I want to hit it perfect. I'm just waiting for that perfect shot to come, and you're not giving it to me quick enough. So what we need is, and what I'm trying to help you with, because I want this to be part of your journey, this is your journey, is you need an action plan. We need to give you an action plan. And what that action plan allows us to do is to predict an outcome. And when we predict an outcome, we then get an actual outcome. And the difference between a novice and an expert performer is that the novice performer isn't very good at predicting the outcome. The predicted outcome and the actual outcome are often very different. So I intended to hit it really good, but it didn't hit it. I topped it and it bounced on the ground. Or from the putting perspective, I'm 15 foot away, and my action plan was to work towards getting it inside 3 feet, and it's finished 6 feet apart. 6 feet past. So that action plan is formulated by that player in the putting example, making a decision on how far they're going to swing the golf club back, what tempo they're going to swing the golf club at, and they execute that, and then they'll get some feedback. And that feedback comes in the form of, right, was I committed to my action plan? Did I execute my action plan? So I might have an intended length of backswing, and I might have an intended tempo or timing that I want to swing the putter at, but actually I didn't execute that, and that's why the golf ball went too far past or didn't go far enough. And then the feedback that to finish off that loop is we then need to, based on our feedback, is make an adjustment to the action plan in order to make a better attempt next time, or affirm that the action plan was really solid, and then we can test it again. So every time we play a golf shot, I want that to be consciously present in a golfer when they're practicing. And in my example here, I am working on the skill of controlling the club face. So lots of people would look at that and go, Mike, you're just working technically. Well, yeah, I am. I'm changing my technique. But I understand that the technique I'm changing is contributing towards a particular skill that's about managing the face of the golf club. So my action plan is to deliver the cobra. So that's related to how my wrists work and how my arms work. So just in that one word, that stimulates lots of feelings for me. And there's a video. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the video on it how I wanted to play. But there's a video of me going through that process. And therefore, my feedback, I execute those swings, and then my feedback comes in the form of, like, yes, I was 100% committed to that. And then I will say, I will rate out of 10 how well I think I executed the cobra. So it might be that was 9 out of 10. I feel like I've absolutely nailed that. My left wrist, my glove hand was in the perfect position at the top of the backswing, and I've got an image of where I think the golf club is at the top of the backswing. And then I'll go and look at the video. And I'll just use the video to confirm that the video images and pictures are what I imagined and are what I expected. So all of a sudden, the feedback is confirming what I thought, or the video is confirming what I thought. And therefore, I think I've started to get this. My expectation is now matching what's actually happening. So now I need to make it harder. So now I might start picking up the speed of the swing. Can I do it at a slightly faster pace? And then all of a sudden, my expectation and my prediction changes a little bit. And I think, oh, I can't do it at this speed now. Do I slow it down? Now can I pick it up again? So it's an interesting, I think it's a brilliant framework around which to practice. And the difference, your action plan and your feedback contribute towards the information that you're gathering. And again, let's just understand the role of information. Learning cannot occur in the absence of information. If there is no action plan, if I'm stood on the putting green and I'm just hitting the golf ball at the hole, there's no action plan, there's no learning, there's no information to work from. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think to a degree, that's what a lot of us might do pre going out to play on a golf course. We might chuck 3 balls down, hit 3 balls. Aimlessly is not the right word, but without much intent. And we just hit the ball to the hole, and then all of a sudden it feels different. Our action plan changes. The putt means different, something different on the golf course. Our action plan changes, and all of a sudden we don't perform quite to the same level. So if the purpose of practice is learning, then we cannot learn anything in the absence of information. We need to use information and stimulate that. The progress of learning cannot occur. Oh, hang on, I did a thing here. I forgot about that. The process of learning cannot occur if information is too much or too little. And this is really important because this talks to and links into block practice and random practice, with block practice being something repetitive. So if we go back to my technique, I was doing block practice. I was repeating the same motion, because what block practice does is it reduces information, but it was the right amount of information for me to be processing at that time and using at that time. In that scenario, that picture of me, I was a novice. I wasn't used to controlling a club face with that technique. So I took myself back to a novice. I needed some guidelines. I needed some rules to abide by in order to help me understand what I was doing and progress with what I was doing. So block practice definitely has its use. And there's lots of stuff out there, if people look into it, that says you should do lots of random practice and potentially only random practice. And I think it depends. It depends where we are with our learning, where we are with our skill level, and what our ambitions are. So information, if you have too much information, then you won't learn, because you won't be able to process and filter through the appropriate information. And if there's not enough information, you won't learn. So that's where the using of block practice and random practice, and probably interchanging between the two, is a skill in itself. So learning will occur with optimal information, which differs as a function of the skill level of the individual and difficulty of the task. So what that means to me is that practice design needs to be relevant to the individual. And if you can understand where you are and how the tasks that you're undertaking, whether they be in a block practice fashion or a random practice fashion, if you've got some strong action plans and you've got some quality, you're giving yourself some quality feedback, you can manage that process much quicker towards you achieving your goals and that skill level you desire. And I think it'll be a lot more fun as well. And of course, I say all this, and I don't expect anybody to kind of get, again, with all these presentations, I don't expect anyone to get any of this in one go necessarily. But hopefully it's making a bit of sense. And it's something I definitely want to help support you with over time. And even in what I've spoken about so far, hopefully those of you that have had lessons with me, you've kind of seen me attempt that what I've just spoken about there with you guys. And I do know definitely that some of you have missed it, and I didn't get it across right, and some of you have definitely got it. So I've just stopped sharing my screen in the moment. Has anyone got any questions on anything I've spoken about so far? So related to information, related to learning, practice for learning, developing skill. I can't see the chat box. Go on, Graham.
Seems to me that a sort of a starting point for all that is that you need to collect a lot of information out on the course in terms of what you do, what you achieve when you're playing, like fairways hit, putts, approaches, sun saves, all that sort of stuff, before you can really do anything.
Well,
You
yeah,
need to
so
know where you are, don't you?
yeah, so certainly based. So Graham's, this is Graham's for everyone else. There's a few of you first timers today, which is absolutely fabulous, and thank you for joining us. So we kind of spoke about that. We've layered on top of that, Graham, in some previous presentations, which I'll share the links with you. And yes, 100%. There's some stats that need to be gathered, or some performance measures that need to be gathered. But I don't necessarily agree that there has to be you can't engage in quality practice without that. So I could work with a complete novice, and I could take them on the putting green, and I could put a ball down a distance away from the hole and say, right, what are your expectations? How many will you take to get in the hole? And they'll have an idea, they'll have an understanding, they'll have some thoughts. And then we'll work it from there, really, and we'll see if we can understand and help them. Okay, what happens? And that, when I'm talking about information, I'm talking about in practice, if you like, between each golf ball, what information am I gathering? So somebody, again, who's never swung a golf club before, they could step up on the range, they could make a swing. In that moment, there'll be some information there that they can tap into that's going to help them perform better the next try. And then if they adjust their action plan, or they give themselves different feedback, or if they do it well, they affirm and quantify or qualify that's why it went well, then the next attempt and the next trial is that much better. And that's how you develop that as a skill. But the interesting thing here is, and I'm going to come into it in a minute, is once we start to notice that our expectations are matching our outcomes, we then need to make it more difficult. And that's the difference between practicing to learn as opposed to practicing to perform. And I think when people practice, they think, I need to hit it well. The purpose of this practice session is for me to hit it well. And once I start hitting it well, that's when I know I've had a good practice session. Well, I might argue that, well, once you're hitting it well, if you stay hitting it well, it's not a great practice session because you've stopped learning. You can't keep learning if there's no information to work with. All you're doing is repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. And
Mark,
so,
sorry.
Yeah, go on, Julie.
Yeah. One of the sessions we did last year, when I basically said I wanted to improve my short game, and then we narrowed that down to shots from, say, 25 yards. And what you did, we went out on the first green, and you paced out 25 yards to a pin on the front, and then another 25 yards to a pin at the back of the green, something like that. And you asked me then what my expectations are. The way we manage the process is you got me to hit 10 balls to each of them in the appropriate place, and then set my action plan or my expectations for desired outcome. We did it that way around, as opposed to this. It sort of implies you want people to set their action plan, desired outcome now, and then go away and do something.
Yeah, no, okay. For each shot. So every single shot. So think of this as in per shot. This isn't an action plan. So we've done some big picture action plans. We've done the action. We've got the 2020 vision. We've got the action plan that says I want to be here, and I'm a 6 out of 10, and I want to be a 13 by the end of June. And we've looked at that. When I'm talking, so this is brilliant, and thank you very much. When we're talking action plan now, I'm talking about an action plan for every single shot you play. So every time you step over a golf ball, every time you step over a driver, an approach play, a bunker shot, or a putt, whether it be a 30-foot putt or a 6-foot putt, every time you stand over the golf ball, you have an action plan in place in order to execute that shot.
And that applies whether it's, I don't know, a medal, a county championship, or you're standing on the range.
100%. 100%. And that's one of the biggest differences, I think. So practice will often involve, I'm just going to keep hitting balls. And again, this is one of the interesting things, is practice is, right, my coach has given me a solution to a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice that solution over and over and over and over again until I don't make any more mistakes. And if I do that, then I should be hitting the golf ball better. And then I'll go back and see my coach or something like that. And I think, well, yeah, if you're a novice in that area, or if you're learning, then that might be a start. But the problem is for me, students stay that end. And then they just go back to their coach for another solution. And what they're doing is they're practicing solutions. But sometimes when you're on the golf course, the problem, that solution you've been practicing isn't the solution to the problem that the golf course is asking for of you. So for example, I've been working on my swing. Well, let's say we did that 25-yard shot and we were working off the fairway. We've worked on that technique. That's absolutely nailed it. We're much better in that area. And then all of a sudden you find yourself on the golf course and now you're in 6 inches of rough. Well, that's not going to work. It's going to be now your skill level, the skill is getting the ball inside that circle that I showed you earlier in the presentation. And you're going to have to now apply a different technique. So you're going to need a different action plan. Does that make sense? And I love this because I think it's a slightly different way of it. It's certainly stretching my boundaries as well, okay? Because I know what I want to get across, and sometimes I find it difficult to make that sound easy. And maybe that's because it's not easy. And I try it in different ways. But I'm kind of liking this idea of like every single shot I stand over, I need an action plan. Because without that action plan, because remember, the action plan gives you the predictability element. If I have no action plan, I can't predict what's going to happen. So that action plan is critical in that part of the equation. And then what I predicted versus what actually happened is a space. And that space is the information we can use in order to help us adjust the practice plan for next time. Action plan. Did I say practice plan then? I don't know. I meant well, whatever. I meant action plan. You got me all excited, Julie. Okay. Right. Let's go back to the presentation. Right. Okay, so I wanted to share this with you guys. So this picture on the right-hand side here, that's me in my training days. And for those of you that aren't Star Wars fans, that's Yoda, when I did some training with Yoda. And I wanted to highlight that and show that, not to show off my, my training days, but it just highlights that there's a novice and an apprentice, and then there's a master. And there's a visual summary there of the Dreyfus model, which is a model that Stuart and Hubert Dreyfus designed or worked with in their academic work. And it just highlights nicely the kind of transition from novice through competence, proficiency, expertise, and mastery, and what that might look like. The need for monitoring and self-observation and feedback reduces across the stages, so it starts off very high and then goes to needing a lot less. And again, this is important. I just wanted to highlight this and show you this because this I want you to manage yourselves through. I want you to consciously try and manage yourselves through and not just kind of let this happen to you, because I do think you can manage yourselves through that. And I want to help support you with that. So rather than me drive that for you, what about if you managed it and I supported you on that journey? And in summary, we've got our student who has a vision for 2020 of breaking 80. We've identified the skill element, which is currently rated at 6, averaging 35 plus putts per round. And we've set a target of 50. So for those of you that weren't in on our last session, we had a no limits. We started off at out of 10, how would you rate yourself? And then we went into a no limits mode. So we set a target of 50, which is to average putts per round, 31 or less, for 6 rounds in a row. I think that's a really cool challenge and a really cool journey. So now every time we have a practice session, every time we go out on a golf course, we can measure those numbers. We can measure the quality of our practice. We can do different designs, working on different areas, and there's lots of different stuff we can do. And we can go, right, let's go on that journey. And for us to make that transition, we need to understand learning occurs when the appropriate amount of information is available to you during practice which in turn depends on the functional difficulty of the task. So what is the right difficulty level for one person isn't going to be the right difficulty level for another person. And if you can understand where you are, you can keep progressively challenging yourself. You go, do you know what? I've got this. I feel like I've got this. My predicted outcomes are starting to consistently match with the actual outcomes. Therefore, I need to make this challenge a little bit more harder. I'm just going to go back actually, because I missed out a bit here. In this model, what I want you to understand as well is this isn't directly related to your game. Okay, this isn't about your whole game. You could be an expert in one area of your game, for example, tee shots, but you could only be competent in another area of your game, for example, putting. And I think, again, that's quite a nice way of looking at that, because you can then start to pitch your practice sessions at the right level. And if you want to train skills interleaving each other, you could then say, let's say, for example, you're at a competence level, and I've done this design with some of you already, I know. You've got a competence level that's in pitching. So we're really working on pitching, and you've got an expertise level in driving. Then we've actually worked on driving and pitching at the same time, so you can practice both skills. And again, when we reflect back on that, we actually noticed that in the expert skill, driving, it took me less time to create an action plan. It took me less thought, because it came quite easy. The responses to situations were quite intuitive. But when it came to competence level and the pitching, it took me longer to kind of formulate that action plan. Right, how far back, how do I need to hold it? How far back do I need to swing it? What tempo do I need to swing it at? Where do I need to hit the ground? Okay, do a few practice swings. Yeah, that feels about right. And then I feel now that swing's going to predict that outcome. I can execute it. And now I can reflect back on, did I commit to my action plan? Did I execute my action plan? And now what was the feedback? So I think that's a really important point, that you can be at different levels of that model in different parts of your game. So information comes from two sources: an action plan, which allows for predictability of outcome, and you can then compare that to the actual outcome, and feedback, which is entirely based on your commitment to the task, execution of the task, adjustment, reinforcement of the action plan. And you need lots of little resources, lots of ways you can help give yourself feedback. Feedback comes objectively. What are the numbers on TrackMan? What does the video say? What did I score in that test? And it also comes back subjectively. How did I feel about that? Out of 10, how close do I think I got to where I wanted to be? And you use both of those to help you develop your game. And if the goal of practice is learning, then when prediction starts to match outcomes, less information is presented and the task needs to be raised. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I'd have no objection to, there's no need. We always want to finish on that good one. I'm thinking, why? Yeah, it satisfies the ego, but is that helping me learn? What if I hit that really good one in the middle and I leveled up and I made the challenge harder and I finished and I didn't do particularly well because I struggled a little bit, but that information helped me get better. So when I come back next time, I can just pick up from there, as opposed to go back to the middle of my last practice session when I was hitting it good. So I think that's a really important slide. What does that look like? Okay, let's take an example of the putter. It wants to break 80. We know that they're looking for 2 putts, 31 putts or less, over 18 holes, and they want to consistently repeat that. So let's say I give them a task that's 5 balls, 1 pace each away from the hole. So set up in the fashion in that picture. And I want them to complete the task in 10 putts or better. You can do this privately. You can just message me, or you can do it in the group, but can have a go at using the chat function. How could you change the functional difficulty of this task? And if you've got any questions, please do ask. So just in the chat function, pop in there just a couple of examples of how you might change the functional difficulty of that task. Yes, I did train in the Dagobah system. I've gone right up in Tom's estimations now. Someone's put a great comment here. It's encoded the name, but from what you've said, it's therefore is therefore to have more on-course lessons in order to deal with the actual challenges that might occur. I definitely would love to do more on-course lessons and see value in on-course lessons when appropriate. So when the information is at such a point where we're not getting enough information in the practice environment, then it's definitely appropriate to go out onto the golf course and start dealing with different problems that provide new challenges that we can learn from. Okay, so how are we going to change this task? Brilliant. Slope of the putt. Yes, 100%. That's a great way. Uphill and downhill. Yep. Move the balls around the hole to give different lines. That's perfect. Change the swing or tempo. Yep. Size of the hole. Yeah, very good. I like that. Very good. Okay, so the important thing about here, and it's not really size of the hole could be a tee peg. Yeah, 100%. That changes the functionality, functional difficulty without a doubt. So really good answers there. So it seems like you understand functional difficulty, and you've got to find and pitch what's the right level for you, so that you're not getting too much information and or not enough information. I also think what I've spoken about today kind of explains a little bit why we do work on the golf course. Sorry, we do work on the practice range where I can see progress in what I'm doing. I feel very comfortable with, let's say, swing changes that we're doing and we're making. But I'm not going to take it to the golf course because I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the shot. And that's a perfect example of where what you predict is going to happen doesn't match what actually is going to happen. And it also is the perfect example of you not giving yourself the best feedback that you could in order to help you make that transition from the practice ground onto the golf course in competition. Related to that task, I didn't define whether that needed to be easier or harder, and I'll let you decide what your intentions were in that sense. But you can make you can make it fun, you can change the difficulty by making it easier as well as harder if appropriate. And there's many different drills you can do. But so long as you can link it into, because alongside this, we might also give the player the ability at home. They might do some home practice where they're working on tempo, they're working with a metronome, they're working on managing the length of their stroke, or they're working on managing the face of the putter so that it approaches more square, or they're managing whether or not they strike the ball on a slight upswing instead of a downswing and jump the ball. And there's lots of things they can be doing alongside this, and I would suggest that's the very best form of practice over time. And that's where we get from that 6 to that 50 in that previous slide is, well, 6 to 8 could be this, and then 8 to 10 could be this. And it's just by taking those small steps. Because if I suddenly go out, if I have a lesson and then suddenly, and I have a good lesson, and then suddenly expect to go out and shoot 31 putts or less, I might be setting myself up to fail a little bit there, because it is going to take a bit of time. So finally, I want you to have a look at this picture here. I think this is one of the best things that was ever shared with me. And I'll share this with as many people as I can. Contrasting golfing environments. Typical golf practice, shots are often not recorded. There's no consequential reward for good or bad shots. Often the shots played are identical. Tournament play, every shot is recorded or counted. And if you're a novice golfer and you're starting, it feels like that. Even though that's not true, it still feels like that. Every shot has a consequence and reward. Every shot is unique. I'll just let you read through that so you can absorb that. So you can see my screen, can't you? I forgot about that. So our goal with practice, if I'm a novice, then being in this practice area space over here, that might not be a bad place to be. But what I want you to do through quality practice and understanding how to manage yourself and your practice is start to make the transition from this red space towards this green space, because that's where golf is played. That's what it takes to be a golfer. And you don't have to wait to be that good. You can start developing those skills and be a part of that right from the word go. But there's a whole ton of space between those two that we can play with. So that's really the end of my presentation for today. Any questions generally on stuff we've spoken about?
Hi, Mark. It's Graham. I think I'm beginning to understand why I've practiced less and less, because I was convinced that it wasn't doing me any good, and I think I now understand why. I've just been not doing it with any real clear purpose.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great start to open up that awareness, and then hopefully there's a little bit in there. So I always record these, Graham, or I record this and I'll pop it through so you can have listen to it again. And I know we communicate anyway between sessions, so feel free to grab me and we'll start looking at how we can design plans that are a little bit more engaging for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi Mark. One of the things with practice is if you go on the range, you've no way of really measuring your shot other than looking at the shot. So it's very difficult, I think, on the course, if you want to hit a shot 145 yards, you choose a club, you know whether you've hit it too long or too short. You go on the range, you might try and measure it to the post or whatever. It's difficult to tell where it's landed. So for all it might fly quite well in the air, never quite sure how good, you might think you've hit it fairly well and you're not really. So I think in all aspects, it's quite difficult to really measure that. I mean, we obviously haven't got any facilities at Mill Green to go to a bay where you call this at some driving ranges now. But I think that is the issue. You tend to bang away hitting balls, really just looking at the flight by eye and hoping you're actually doing it better.
Yeah, so this is where, I mean, this depends. Is there like a question? That sounds more like an observation. Is there a question?
I think if you show your chart like you just did with what you do in competition tournament play and what you do on the range, you can't really measure range in the way you would in a competition round. In a competition round, you'd be able to sort of review it. You'd know what shots you'd be hit or you've written down your score or whatever. You'd be able to judge that. Whereas when you go for a practice session, you don't really get that. You don't get that intensity of it.
Okay, so I think I understand the question now. So that it's a really good point. It's probably not going to be the same, but the trick to that is, and what it sounds like to me, is that we just haven't found the right reward and consequence. I think you're talking about reward and consequence in practice.
I probably am, actually, yeah.
And so if that's the case, then I would suggest that you can create reward and consequence on a practice session. And in its simplest form, so as an example, I might want to be working on approach play, and therefore I'm going to play a game on the driving range. So if you can imagine the markers at the back of the driving range are the fairway. And for those that aren't members of Mill Green, there's just two markers which reflect probably the width of a fairway, which is quite nice. And what you could do is you could hit your driver, and if you miss that fairway, you go one down. You play match play against the driving range. And if you miss that fairway, you go one down. And if you hit that fairway, you can then play an approach shot. Now, to make this even more meaningful, what I would do on my phone is I have a random number generator. It's a completely free app, and you put in there between 90 and 150 yards. Yeah. And then you push the button and it comes up 132 yards. So whatever club you feel you would hit 132 yards, you choose that club and you execute that shot, but it has to finish between where your ball finished on the fairway and the right-hand edge of the fairway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you get that ball in that space, you go one up. But if you don't, you go one down.
Yeah,
And then
I do try and do that a little bit, or similarly. I tend to, if I've hit a few balls and got myself warmed up, I might say, okay, we're now playing the sixth hole, so I'm going to hit a shot with a driver. And then if I hit a good shot, I might be saying, okay, I'm now going to go for the green with whatever, rescue, 5-iron or whatever. And I try and put that same pressure on myself to get over the imaginary water in one, just to get that feeling of the same tension you'll get on the course.
yeah. So and I think that sounds. I think that's a great idea and something worth doing. But I think you're even further beyond that, and I don't think that's not stimulating the consequences of or the rewards.
Okay.
That's you imagining the shot, and like you said, you're trying to put yourself under this pressure. And so, okay, well, let's figure out what are the right consequences and the right rewards for you. So there is a stronger sense of what they offer you. Yeah, because at the moment it's kind of, I'm kind of doing, but it doesn't really matter if I hit the fairway. It doesn't really matter if I put it in the water, in the imaginary water. And so, well, actually, if I made you do 10 press ups after you put it in the water, it might feel a little bit different. If I made you run around the practice ground, it might make you feel a little bit different about that. And you're like, oh, actually, it might. And then what's interesting there is it will change your action plan. You'll do something different in preparation for that shot because it'll be more meaningful. So I think at the moment for you, and in that example, we just haven't found the right reward and consequence. Where I do think you could, based on some of our previous conversations, I think you could really explore this on the putting green.
Yeah.
When you mentioned about there's a difference between what I do on the golf course and what I do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think right. Well, there's loads of opportunities there for you to design some sessions and become aware of and notice your action plans. You're not aware of your action plans on the putting green, but they become heightened and negative on the golf course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, quite interesting.
Really good point, though. Thanks for raising that. Cool. Anyone else want to talk about kind of anything they're doing? Or
hello, Mark. I'll go sort of through this with Gary, to be honest. With me, practices, try to keep it as real as possible, because I find out when I go on the course, different parts of my game will be better some days, and then other parts will be better on other days. And it's doesn't seem to be a consistent floor. But the one thing I did notice towards the end of the start of this season, before lockdown, was that it was putting was going around between 26 and 36 putts, which is probably the epitome of inconsistency. So I adopted towards the end of when we were just playing the claw grip, which I want to look at in sort of greater detail with Gary. But I did feel that it was giving me a lot better distance control. And I wasn't feeling so anxious over putts as well by using that. Before I get into any sort of really bad habits, are there any sort of fundamentals that I should bear in mind when using that method?
Well, I think that's very specific to the technique. So keeping that on point with quality practice, I think it doesn't matter what method you use, so long as you understand how that's going to help upskill you. So what is it that the claw grip is giving you that your other grip wasn't giving you? So is it giving you the freedom to make a better, more even tempo to the swing? Is it giving you more control of the face? So it's allowing you a more consistent strike, which is getting you more consistent roll, which produces more consistent distance. So what is it that the claw grip is giving you? When it comes to bad habits, and what I think can happen a lot with golfers is there's so much media out there and there's so many different solutions what golfers tend to do is go, right, let me try that solution from that person on Instagram. And, oh, that works really well for the first couple of sessions. Oh, no, it's not working. Oh, maybe that just wasn't the right. Let me go and find another solution from another page on Instagram. And, oh, that seems to work quite well now. Oh, no, that's not working now either. Let me go and find another solution somewhere else. I read this in a magazine. Oh, let me try that. And I think that all breaks down because there's not clarity in, right, what's my ultimate goal? What am I trying to achieve? What skill am I aiming to develop? How does this interact with the score that I want to shoot overall? So it's that big picture thinking that I don't think you're another first one today, are you, Mick?
Second. I missed the last one, but
missed the last one. Okay, so it's getting that right. There's my big picture thinking, bringing it right down to this moment right now. Right, how do those changes influence my ability to manage the ball into the hole? How does it improve my prediction of outcome to match my actual outcome? So you can use lots of different techniques. I could argue I could use 4 or 5 different grips. It doesn't matter which grip I use. I understand how to manage the face of the putter. So I'm going to hold every 3-foot putt I stand over with 5 different grips because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at data to see what it was doing technically. But even from an emotional point of view, I mean, I'd get stressed through work, and on bad days, it impacts my putting more than any other part of the game. I tense up a little bit. I just found that using the claw grip and the kind of almost a separation of the hands,
yeah,
that it provided a more consistent and fluid. I wasn't resorting to sort of hitting the ball. I was able more consistently.
Perfect. So there's a very clear reason to continue using that. I don't see any. From what it sounds like here, I wouldn't see any issue with that. I would just be interested to test it. So how are you going to progressively challenge those practice sessions so you can test it rather than keep doing the same thing over and over again? Now that means, and this is a classic example, says, well, actually the putting green's not enough for me. I now need to test it more on the golf course. So when you go out and play of an evening, like, what can you do that's different to testing, so that it forces you to test your putting? So that might be you create a game that says you've got to draw back every single putt you stand over, for example, which means you can't actually finish a hole unless you hold a 3, 4, 5 foot putt. Now that challenges most techniques.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I'm conscious we've gone for an hour now. So again, thank you so much for your engagement and your participation. I'll get this sent over and hopefully get to see you all again next week. As always, do feel free to follow up with any questions or conversations. It keeps me busy, hopefully keeps you guys busy and gets you ready and set for success this summer when we do get back out on the golf course. So well done and enjoy the weekend.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. See you soon.